The Cleveland Browns just made one of the boldest and riskiest moves of the NFL draft. With the eyes of the football world watching, they selected Shedeur Sanders to be the next face of their franchise. On the surface, it's a move dripping with potential. A quarterback with elite poise, NFL bloodlines, and media magnetism. The son of Deion Sanders, a brand all his own, Shedeur enters the league with more attention than most rookies could ever dream of. But here's the truth nobody in Cleveland wants to admit. This pick could end in disaster. Not because Shedeur isn't talented, not because he doesn't have the tools, but because this is the Cleveland Browns, a franchise that has chewed up and spit out more quarterbacks than any team in modern NFL history, a franchise where promising careers go to die. And now they're placing their hopes, again, on a young, flashy quarterback to fix decades of dysfunction overnight. It's not just a question of talent. It's a question of fit, a question of timing, a question of culture. Shedeur Sanders was built for a big market, for controlled chaos, for the spotlight. What he's walking into in Cleveland is something very different. A franchise with a tortured past, a fan base starving for success, and a system that might not suit his skill set at all. In this video, we're going to show you why this pick, while exciting, could become the Browns' biggest regret. We'll break down the system mismatch, the off-field distractions, the pressure cooker expectations, and the long, painful history of quarterbacks who've tried and failed to save this team. Because this wasn't just a draft pick. This was the Browns going all in on a narrative. And that story might not have a happy ending. The hype behind Shedeur Sanders. To understand why this pick feels so electric and so dangerous, you have to understand the hype machine behind Shedeur Sanders. This isn't just another college quarterback. Shedeur is a walking headline. At Colorado, under the spotlight of his father Deion Coach Prime Sanders, he became a household name. He shattered school records, made off-platform throws look effortless, and orchestrated dramatic comebacks that had social media on fire. He carried himself with calm under pressure, showed incredible footwork, and put up stats that popped off the page. And he did all of this with the cameras always rolling. From custom watches and luxury cars to vlogs and sideline swagger, Shedeur mastered the art of being seen. He wasn't just a football player, he was a brand, a storyline, a movement. For a Browns franchise desperate to turn the page, this looked like hope in human form. Add in his poise in interviews, his NFL bloodline, and the mentorship of one of the greatest defensive backs to ever play the game. And it's easy to see why Cleveland fans got caught up in the dream. On paper, Shedeur has it all. Arm strength, mobility, leadership, and the ability to handle the pressure of the moment. He doesn't flinch, he doesn't fold, and he doesn't look like someone who's afraid of the big stage. To the Browns, this wasn't just a football decision, it was a business move. Shedeur sells tickets, he sells jerseys, he gives the team a face to put on billboards. For a franchise that has struggled to stay relevant off the field and consistent on it, this pick felt like a tidal wave of momentum. But here's the problem with hype. It fades the moment reality hits, when the cameras stop rolling, when the pocket collapses, when the pressure becomes more than just figurative. That's when we'll start to see if the Browns drafted a savior, or just the next name in a long list of quarterbacks who never had a chance. The Browns' quarterback graveyard. If you're going to draft a quarterback in Cleveland, you better be ready to carry a legacy, not of greatness, but of ghosts. Since returning to the NFL in 1999, the Browns have become infamous for one thing above all else: ruining quarterbacks, over and over again. Let's run the list. Tim Couch was the first pick of the new era, a raw but talented prospect who never had a chance behind a broken offensive line and a revolving door of coaches. By the time the team got semi-stable, Couch was already shell-shocked. Next came names like Brady Quinn, a Notre Dame Golden Boy who had the looks, the arm, and none of the processing speed for NFL defenses. Brandon Weeden was drafted at age 28. He was overwhelmed by Week 1 and gone by Year 2. Colt McCoy showed flashes, but the Browns never committed. Then there was Johnny Manziel, one of the most explosive college players of the modern era, thrown into a dysfunctional system with no mentorship and all the wrong habits. It wasn't long before TMZ headlines were more common than touchdown passes. And then, Baker Mayfield. For a brief moment, he looked like the one who could break the cycle. He had the swagger, the arm, the chip on his shoulder. He even delivered Cleveland's first playoff win in nearly 2 decades. But the honeymoon ended fast. Injuries, friction with coaches, and the organization's constant need to chase something better tore it all down. Every few years, Cleveland hits the reset button. New quarterback, new face of the franchise. Same result. And now it's Shedeur Sanders' turn. The Browns aren't just asking Shedeur to be good, they're asking him to be the one who changes everything. The savior, the outlier, the first quarterback in 25 years to survive the chaos, steady the ship, and drag the franchise out of the mud. History says that's a tall order. Because in Cleveland, it's not about how much talent you have. It's about how long you can survive before the whole machine swallows you whole. System mismatch. Why Shedeur doesn't fit Cleveland's offense. When you draft a quarterback, it's not just about picking talent. It's about picking someone who fits your system, someone who can step into your offensive scheme and thrive. And this is where the Browns may have made their biggest mistake. Kevin Stefanski's offense is built around structure. It's timing-based. It demands quick decisions, precision footwork, and execution within the framework of the play. It's a system that thrives on play action, layered route concepts, and methodical drives down the field. Think Kirk Cousins with a better run game. You don't need to be flashy. You need to be efficient. But Shedeur Sanders? His game is anything but structured. At Colorado, Shedeur operated in a wide-open, RPO-heavy offense. He lived in the shotgun. He extended plays constantly, thrived off improvisation, and often held onto the ball looking for the big play. He was a creator, not a controller. A gunslinger who made magic happen when things broke down. In the NFL, that approach doesn't always translate, especially not in a system like Stefanski's. There's little room for freelancing. The margins are razor thin. You have to trust the play design, hit your back foot, and get the ball out now. Holding the ball, rolling out every other snap, that doesn't just lead to sacks, it leads to turnovers. The question becomes, will Stefanski adapt his system to Shedeur? Or will Shedeur be forced to mold his game into something it's never been? Because here's the reality. If Shedeur's processing speed doesn't catch up to NFL defenses, and fast, this marriage is going to break down early. And we've seen this story before. Talented quarterbacks forced into the wrong mold rarely last long. Just ask Justin Fields in Chicago, or Zach Wilson in New York. This isn't Madden. You can't just drop a talented quarterback into any playbook and expect magic. If the Browns can't tailor their offense to fit Shedeur's instincts, or if Shedeur can't adjust to the constraints of Stefanski's system, then this won't just be a mismatch. It'll be a meltdown. Why Shedeur has no room to fail. Every rookie quarterback faces pressure. But the pressure in Cleveland? It's different. It's louder, heavier, more desperate. And Shedeur Sanders is about to feel all of it. This isn't just a franchise looking for a quarterback. It's a franchise starving for one. Fans aren't just hopeful. They're exhausted, tired of the rebuilds, tired of the next guy, tired of waiting. And now that Shedeur has been crowned the savior, the expectations are already sky high. The moment he struggles, even a little, people won't just question his play. They'll question everything. Was he worth the pick? Is he too distracted by the cameras? Is he just another product of Coach Prime's hype machine? It doesn't help that Shedeur's arrival comes after years of dysfunction. The Deshaun Watson trade didn't work. Baker Mayfield imploded. The team cycled through names like Tyrod Taylor, Jacoby Brissett, and P.J. Walker just to keep the offense moving. And now, the city is looking at Shedeur to not just play quarterback, but to erase all of that failure with one clean slate. That's a brutal ask for a 21-year-old. And unlike quarterbacks taken in more forgiving markets, like Tennessee, Seattle, or Atlanta, Shedeur has no buffer, no grace period. The moment he throws a pick or takes a bad sack, the headlines will start writing themselves. Every move he makes will be scrutinized, slowed down, dissected on sports talk shows, and flooded across social media. Even worse, he's the kind of player that attracts attention by default. Every time Shedeur walks into a room, the cameras follow. That might work in Boulder, but in Cleveland? That spotlight only amplifies the noise. And when you're losing games, that noise gets ugly, fast. Pressure isn't new to Shedeur, but the kind of pressure he's about to face? It's not built for influencers. It's built to break quarterbacks. And unless everything goes exactly right, it won't be long before the future of the franchise turns into the next scapegoat. The off-field distraction no one's talking about. Shedeur Sanders isn't just a quarterback. He's a brand. From day one, he's brought the spotlight with him. Luxury watches on the sidelines, custom Rolls Royces, high-end fashion, NIL deals, behind-the-scenes vlogs. He's not just part of the package, it is the package. And for most of his college career, that brand worked. It made him a household name. It made Colorado a national story. It made Coach Prime's movement go viral. But the NFL, especially in Cleveland, it's a different world entirely. This is a blue-collar football city, a place that worships grit, toughness, and humility. A town where the most beloved athletes aren't the ones with the flashiest chains. They're the ones who bleed for the jersey. Guys like Nick Chubb, Joe Thomas, players who let their game do the talking. Now imagine Shedeur walking into that locker room. He's got the camera crew. He's got the fan base split between excitement and skepticism. He's got teammates who've spent years grinding for every snap, suddenly sharing a huddle with a guy who shows up in designer gear and already has millions in endorsements before throwing a single NFL pass. It creates tension. Whether intentional or not, it sends a message. I'm not just a player. I'm a star. That can work in some locker rooms if you win, if the results come fast, but if they don't, that flash becomes fuel. For the media, for critics, even for teammates. The spotlight that once elevated you starts to burn, especially when you're losing. This doesn't mean Shedeur is a bad teammate. By all accounts, he's dedicated and respected. But in the NFL, perception matters. And in Cleveland, perception turns quickly. The Browns didn't just draft a quarterback, they drafted a walking brand. And in a league where success is measured by wins, not watch collections, Shedeur's style could become his greatest liability. Earning respect in the NFL. One of the most underrated parts of a young quarterback's success isn't talent, it's trust. If the locker room doesn't believe in you, it doesn't matter how good your arm is, or how many Instagram followers you have. And this is where Shedeur Sanders walks into a minefield. The Browns' locker room is full of veterans, guys who've battled through losing seasons, coaching changes, and constant instability. Many of them have played with 3, 4, even 5 different quarterbacks in their time in Cleveland. What they want now isn't flash, they want stability. They want a guy who shows up early, puts his head down, earns every snap, and delivers. Shedeur, through no fault of his own, walks in with a reputation. Not just as a player, but as a personality. The flashy lifestyle, the luxury cars, the social media presence. In today's NFL, that doesn't automatically disqualify you, but it does raise eyebrows if you don't back it up immediately. He has to prove he's not just here to be a celebrity. He's here to be a quarterback. Leadership in the NFL isn't about pre-game speeches. It's about what you do on Wednesdays. It's about how you respond when you throw 2 picks, how you act when you're down 14 in the fourth quarter, how you treat the third-string lineman who just got called up from the practice squad. Veterans notice everything, and if they feel like a young QB is more concerned with branding than ball, that trust disappears quick. And once it's gone, you don't get it back. That's the challenge for Shedeur. He's not just competing against NFL defenses. He's competing for the faith of a locker room that's been burned before. If he earns that respect, he'll be fine. But if he loses it, if the losses mount and the personality starts to feel bigger than the performance, that locker room will turn cold, fast, and no amount of Instagram likes can fix that. The danger of getting hit too early, too often. For any rookie quarterback, development is everything. But in Cleveland, development doesn't happen in a lab. It happens in chaos. And for Shedeur Sanders, that could be a career-altering problem. Let's start with the offensive line. This unit has talent, sure, but it's aging, it's been banged up, and it's lost key consistency over the years. Pass protection has been suspect, especially against top-tier defensive fronts. Now throw Shedeur into the AFC North, where he'll face T.J. Watt, Trey Hendrickson, and a Ravens defense that lives in the backfield, twice a year. In college, Shedeur took a lot of hits. Colorado had one of the worst offensive lines in the country, and Shedeur was sacked more than any quarterback in Division I. He was tough, he played through it, but it clearly affected his rhythm. And that kind of punishment doesn't get easier in the NFL. It gets worse. Here's the nightmare scenario. He takes those same hits in Cleveland, only now it's behind a leaky pocket, with a complex playbook, faster defenders, and no time to grow. The confidence starts to slip. The internal clock gets shaky. The bad habits creep in. That's how quarterbacks break. Now look at the weapons around him. Amari Cooper is great when healthy. David Njoku has flashed, but consistency has always been the issue. The Browns' run game isn't what it was without Nick Chubb fully healthy. And the receiving corps lacks a true game-breaking threat. In short, there's no security blanket. No elite weapon that can bail Shedeur out when things break down. That means the burden falls squarely on his shoulders. He has to be the playmaker, the stabilizer, the hero. And that's exactly how young quarterbacks get ruined. You ask too much, too fast, you surround them with chaos, you expect them to carry a franchise instead of grow with one. If the Browns don't protect Shedeur, physically and schematically, they won't just stunt his development. They'll destroy it, living in a legend's shadow. Shedeur Sanders isn't just any quarterback prospect, he's Deion Sanders' son. And that means no matter what he does, he'll never just be judged as a player. He'll be judged as Coach Prime's kid. That spotlight can be a blessing and a curse. There's no question Deion has prepared Shedeur for the moment. He taught him how to handle pressure, how to lead, how to carry himself like a professional. Shedeur was groomed for the spotlight and lived in it comfortably at Colorado. But in the NFL, that connection to Deion brings more than just mentorship. It brings expectation, constant comparison, endless speculation. Every press conference will have a Prime-related question. Every mistake Shedeur makes will have people asking, "What does Deion think?" Every time Shedeur gets benched or struggles, someone will be ready to say he was just riding his dad's coattails. And worst of all, every success might be credited to his father, not to him. That's a brutal dynamic for a young quarterback trying to carve his own path. He can't control the narrative. He can't outrun the surname. And if things go wrong in Cleveland, he won't just be labeled a bust. He'll be labeled the failed project of Deion Sanders. Even worse, Deion himself is a media force. He's not going to stay silent if the Browns mishandle his son. The moment things get tense, whether it's a benching, a rough stretch, or a coaching disagreement, you can bet the Sanders family will become part of the story. And that's the last thing a team like Cleveland needs: more noise. Shedeur has to find his own voice, his own identity. But in Cleveland, surrounded by pressure, dysfunction, and a media landscape ready to jump on every storyline, escaping his father's shadow won't be easy. He's not just playing against defenses. He's playing against a legacy. What the Browns could have done instead. When the Browns drafted Shedeur Sanders, they didn't just make a bold move, they passed up a dozen safer, smarter ones. That's the part that stings the most for some fans. Not just who they picked, but what they passed up to do it. Let's start with roster needs. Cleveland's defense, while talented, still needed help in the secondary and depth in the trenches. Several elite defensive prospects were still on the board. If the Browns weren't ready to commit to a full rebuild around a rookie QB, they could have continued building out the roster and waited for the right quarterback to come along next year. Maybe someone like Quinn Ewers or even Arch Manning, depending on how the college season unfolds. They also could have traded down. In a draft where quarterback hype was sky high, teams behind Cleveland were itching to move up. The Browns could have gained extra picks, added key depth, and bought themselves time with a veteran placeholder, like Jacoby Brissett or another bridge QB, while continuing to build a more stable foundation. Instead, they did the opposite. They reached for a quarterback who, while talented, still carried question marks, and invited the circus with him. It wasn't a bad idea to draft a quarterback.
Pick in the
The
NFL
issue
draft, his
is
growth.
this quarterback, in this moment, in this city. Because this wasn't just about football. It was about branding, attention, and flash. And when you make a pick for anything other than football reasons, history tends to punish you for it. The Browns weren't forced into this decision. They chose it. They wanted the attention, the excitement, the sizzle. But in the NFL, sizzle doesn't last. Substance does. And Cleveland may have just passed on the chance to build real substance just to chase the next viral moment. Why this could all fall apart. The Cleveland Browns didn't just draft Shedeur Sanders. They took a gamble on hope, hype, and headlines. They didn't just want a quarterback, they wanted a savior. Someone to lift the franchise out of decades of dysfunction and give the fans something, someone to believe in. But belief alone doesn't win in the NFL. Fit does. Development does. Culture does. And this is where the cracks are already showing. Shedeur's playing style doesn't match the offense. His background and branding don't match the locker room culture. The franchise's history with quarterbacks reads like a cautionary tale, and he's stepping into one of the most intense media environments in football, armed with a last name that draws attention no matter what he does. The pressure? Immense. The expectations? Unrealistic. The margin for error? Non-existent. It's easy to fall in love with the idea of Shedeur Sanders, the arm talent, the composure, the story. But in Cleveland, success isn't about potential. It's about survival. And this franchise has a long, painful track record of destroying quarterbacks before they ever get a real chance to grow. This isn't about whether Shedeur is talented. He is. It's about whether this franchise, at this time, in this system, is capable of helping him reach that talent without tearing him down in the process. Because if the Browns get this wrong again, if Shedeur becomes just another name on the jersey of forgotten hopes, it won't just set the team back. It could ruin a young quarterback's career. The Browns didn't just make a draft pick. They made a statement. And if they're wrong, they won't just regret it. They'll be haunted by it.